Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. Fade to Black. How you doing? How you doing? That's right. Today is Thursday. It's my Friday. I've got bragging rights. I'm going to rub it in. That's right. Today is my Friday. I need 3 days to get ready for next week. You would think that I would go off and do stuff and goof around all weekend and party with rock stars and stuff. I did that last weekend, but it's my Friday, and what a great way to wrap up the week with John Greenewald. And I've called the show tonight the Fade to Black Vault. I was just talking to John about this before the show. I don't know how the two of us missed that golden opportunity for 10 years now, the Fade to Black Vault. That is just, I feel like I accomplished something. And it was one of those things, ding, right? And I was like, what? That is so obvious. So that's what we're doing tonight. John Greenewald is here to wrap up our week on Fade to Black. I want to remind everybody to get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. Everything is autographed. John Greenewald will autograph my t-shirts for you. And he's got an autograph machine. And that's how he signs all his stuff. At least that's what he told me before the show. And get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. It includes shipping, helps support everything that we do around here. We do so many shows each week, and which includes, like today, 3 live shows today. And a great show earlier today with Christina Gomez. So help support what we do. Get yourself a membership. Get a Fade to Black t-shirt. Become a Fader-Not. All the links for everything are below. But tonight, it's about John Greenewald. And the best thing about having John on the show, and I'm not kidding, we've tried to do this over the years. I don't know how many times him and I have sat down and done things together, done movies together and conferences. We try to formulate a plan. Okay, what do you want to do? Okay, well, let's do this. And it never happens. So that's why it's great when he's on the show, because the conversation will just go where it goes. All right. He began researching the U.S. government in 1996 at the tender young age of 15 years old. That's right. He was targeting the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon, the Air Force, the Army, Navy, NSA, the DIA. By going after FOIA and documents. He has accumulated millions and millions of documents. I doubt that he even knows how many documents he has. He's uploaded, he's transcribed, he's typed, he's copied, he has scanned. It's a brave world that he's in. And they say, you know what? You got to pick your battles. I often wonder if the intimidation machine has ever come down on John. He has named that online archive the Black Vault. And I have said this a million times. It is the reason to have the internet. His books include Beyond UFO Secrecy, Inside the Black Vault, and The Secrets of the Black Vault. I hear that he's working on another new book. Maybe we will talk about that tonight. His website, of course, is theblackvault.com. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only. There he is, my neighbor, John Greenewald. John, you look good, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So do you. It's good to be here. It's been a while.
Man, it's been a minute. You know, we talk, but it's been a minute, and there's no excuse for that.
I will say you're the only show when you do a sound check. When you and I do it, it's like a 25-minute sound check. We've got to catch up. We've got to talk. We've got to And by the very
fix
end, I'm like,
things.
so do I sound okay or
Yeah,
what?
yeah, right, yeah. Weren't we sound checking?
Yeah.
But you know what? We got the
Always a good
kids
time.
out of the way. We got the family out of the way. We got all of that caught up. And you know about my neighbors. I know about yours, and we're good to go. So I wanted to say this, and I remember telling you this story many, many years ago, but I'm gonna tell the story again for those that have never heard it. When I discovered the Black Vault and the internet back then, as we both know, fresh, right? Innocent. It was
I don't
like,
know about innocent.
dude,
Not that I did anything.
compared to now, it was like a lamb drinking water in a bubbling brook. That was the internet back then.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I stumble upon the Black Vault 1.0. Right? And I'm like, what is this? And I'm going through and I'm like, man, my computer's going to catch on fire. Right? I'm going to have the man knocking at my door. This shouldn't be out there. This is crazy. Perfect name too, right? The Black Vault. And I'm going through and I'm looking at this stuff, and I felt that I had arrived at my special place. And I've always looked at the Black Vault with that set of eyes. And I've been around since the beginning. And that's it. I'll just never forget that, you know, that feeling that you have when you buy alcohol with a fake ID, or you get into a club at the age of 18. Yes, yeah, right. You know what I mean? Where you're you feel like you're about to get caught, but you get away with it. That's what it was like logging into the Black Vault back then. You were rolling the dice, man. Did you have any idea of the consequences and of course the celebrity that comes along with that?
A good word.
Yeah, yeah.
I really didn't. When I was 15, like you said, when I started it, I mean, I was literally typing in the documents by hand. It was something that I never thought that I would, do for a long time. I also didn't think about it. I mean, I just had fun with it when I was 15, but I was literally typing the documents in on hand and in by hand. And the Black Vault back then, just because the nature of the internet was so different. I mean, you were reading documents I had created for the computer geeks out there like myself, like an ASCII character key to essentially decode the text. So it wasn't all text. There's a lot of redactions. There were hard to read words. So I had developed a key to actually depict redacted words, depict words that you couldn't read. And it was a nightmare. But eventually got a sponsorship from somebody who had watched the Black Vault kind of grow. And I remember I reached, I think 300 or 500 pages or something like that. And that was around the time where I got the sponsorship for a flatbed scanner. And back then, that was a big deal. I mean, this was the mid 90s. So scanners existed, but I mean, they weren't exactly the cheapest of all things. And I got this old flatbed scanner donated to me. So I was able to start scanning. And man, I mean, I could bore you to death for hours just on the evolution of the technology to run it. Cause I don't have a lot of money even now, but especially back then I had nothing. So I was relying on not only donations like that, but people watching and saying, oh, you need a new scanner. And then I was able to buy a scanner. This was a couple years into the Black Vault, but one with an automatic document
page feeder with a page feeder.
Oh man. But back then it was something like
you were big timing.
Yeah, you were edge, right?
You were big timing it, man. You were big timing.
ATF. And so back then, again, this was totally just kind of like cutting edge. And I was just a kid in a candy store. Like now I could just scan these things over and over instead of, one scan and then you pick up the thing and put another one and then shut it and press scan again. It changed the whole thing. But fast forward to 27 plus years later, it's more than 3.4 million pages that have gone on to the Black Vault. And for those who don't know me here, it's all free. I don't charge for it. There's no registration required. Most sites have at least a registration requirement. I don't. I mean, I respect people's privacy, and very much like you said back in the 90s when you were watching it. You know, some people are uncomfortable. They don't know like what they're getting into. It's all legal. There's nothing leaked or classified in it. But if you don't know the true background to it, it gets uneasy. And it's interesting to see the letters that come into my email box every day of people that not only have that same concern, others, and I take this as a compliment. There's a lot of people that actually think that I faked the documents, even though anybody can confirm it for themselves. But why I consider that a compliment is that they're so interesting that people think, no, this is a fake site. Why are you doing this and stuff like that? So it's across the gamut of the type of feedback that I get here 27 years later. But back to your question, did I ever expect this? Did I ever think I'd still be doing it? Not really. But in the same breath, I say, yeah, absolutely. Because I love it. And I've never lost the love for it.
I remember you must have seen the spikes in website attention and traffic through your site because you have broke so many stories that were stories, documents, or reports on documents, right? That have been referenced on other large websites. They give you the correct attribute, which they should. And then your website traffic just, have you ever exploded your server?
Yeah. And in fact, quite a few years ago, and this is probably 20 years ago, the Black Vault / myself, I'm the only guy that runs it. I had crashed a multi-million-dollar internet web hosting provider called SimpleNet. And SimpleNet was one of the only what they considered unlimited providers out there. They did unlimited storage, unlimited bandwidth. Well, because of what I had done after I had gone on Whitley Strieber's NBC special, that's what crashed it. And so that was 1999. So God, even more than 20 years. I'm getting old. I talked to the tech on duty that night, and to make a long technical story short, it had not only crashed the server, they decided to take it offline. They waited 10 minutes, put it back online, and it crashed the network within like 30 seconds or 90 seconds or something like that. And they started refusing service. After that, they redefined the definition of unlimited, because what happened was they had no way to really combat sites like mine, even though it was kind of a rarity to get that big. But when you had that much traffic and that much storage, unlimited, it's not really unlimited. And they literally had to redefine the definition of unlimited in their terms of use policy. And since then, most internet providers have the same type of definition, where they will not allow you to go over a certain percentage of resources on the server, or they cut your service. Back in the late 90s, that did not exist. And again, the company was SimpleNet. It's out of business now, and it's been bought.
You put them out.
I didn't put them out of business. No, I'm not going to take that claim. But look, that was a geeky notch in my belt, because that was very frustrating, because I'll say it again. I just did not have the money to run this, because I had to then move to a dedicated server. And then the dedicated servers, those are what are called metered. And so you have to adhere to not only the disk space on that dedicated server, but the bandwidth that you use. So when people are downloading documents. So now I have 4 dedicated servers in different states to help alleviate the load. And I also run what are called caching servers. So when people download stuff, it's not as big of a load. So the technical end of this, again, that's where my geekiness comes out, has been completely, how can I say, revamped in the last, even 10 years. I've had to make changes, let alone the last 27 since it first started. That first site was like a 5 megabyte free storage on a company called PrimeNet, and I still remember that. And then I got the domain, theblackvault.com, started with blackvault.com. Then I got a couple of renditions of it and just kind of grew from there. But yeah, it's gigantic. I mean, it's terabytes of data. It transfers well into the terabytes of data every month, which is a lot. I mean, you're talking about a major attacks on web servers and networking and stuff like that. But it's fun. Again, that's where my geekiness comes out.
We're going to move on here in just a second, but
you want to talk about tech stuff this whole time?
Yeah. Well, see, all of the growing pains that you went through, we did the same thing here at Fade to Black, because when we first started out, we had one show. Put it in context, 10 shows, whatever. That's so much disk space for the memberships, right? Today, we have 2,000 plus shows. That's a lot of data, right? And most of those shows are 3-hour long audio files. So all of that has to sit on a separate server, just like you're saying. And same thing, we have our own dedicated servers, and we own our own mail servers, right? Everything is completely separate, and they are set on multiple servers on multiple rings. And you know what rings are. Most of the audience don't. But so we've got everything out and spaced and redundant and backed up. And I never thought that I would get to this point of, and it's a good thing I don't run it. I've got a couple of people that are on top of their game that have been with me for a number of years. They keep all of this stuff sorted and keep the website up and the memberships and files and data and the archives. It's a big job. It's a big job.
Yeah,
it's a big job.
It's a chore in itself.
Yes, it is. Now, speaking of that, I utilize you all the time because, and I want everybody to understand exactly what John is just saying. If there's something you want to see, go to the Black Vault. Okay. And he's got a great search engine there. You can pull up the document and there it is. You can download it. You can view it. It's all right there. And I do it constantly. And I want to talk about the AARO report. And when the AARO report was released, I did 2 shows the next day. I think I did one with Christina Gomez, and then I did Fade to Black that night. I did like 2 different shows with your download, right? And I got to give credit where credit is due, and I gave everybody the link to the Black Vault, and it's easy. And if there's something you want to research, if there's something you've heard about, or whatever, chances are John has done some kind of document request on that subject. It's all there. And so head over to the Black Vault, search, and then you can look at the actual document yourself. It's what I do. And so when the AARO report was released, you popped out your link for it immediately. And I had told everybody I read the document 4 or 5 times that afternoon. I read the whole thing, flipped it over, right, back to page 1 or the cover page, and read through it again because of the Black Vault. And that's just thank you. And
I appreciate that.
Now, as I read through the report, my first comment, and I've got a bunch of questions here, and I love what you have been doing lately with the community and keeping everybody informed, because there's so many tentacles that reach out off of that report. So much to pay attention to. You are a document pillar of knowledge with a pulse, right? that's the only way I can describe you. And so I read through the report, and it seemed to me to be personal. It wasn't objective. It seemed personal, like somebody was pissed off. And I got that flavor, and I read through it again, and I went, who wrote this? So, I'm going back to the back page, I'm going to the foot, I'm going to this, and there's no authors listed. Now, I could be wrong here, but did that surprise you? And did you notice that the author or authors of that report are not noted?
To be honest with you, not really. And the reason I say that is just because when you look at enough government reports, a lot of them have no attribution or byline. And that's just because there's likely multiple people that took the different sections of that report and wrote them, and they probably just essentially attributed it to AARO. That part didn't really stick out to me at all. I mean, I would say what stuck out more was the lack of names. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Well, we'll
now
get to
or
that.
later,
That's it. Yes.
but yeah, I mean, they didn't have names kind of at all. And in a public report like that, again, the attribution for the byline of who authored it, it's more the organization or program or project or whatever with the respective report that we're talking about. In this case, AARO's report, that's the attribution as AARO as a whole. This is more
but that's kind of a cop out. And the reason why I say that is because if it's a team or if it's an organization, then you keep it was written in the first person. You can see that it was written as a personal attack and it's an opinion. It's not really a report of any facts. And it doesn't,
but they missed a lot. And I think that to your point about the byline, if I can just add this one thing, I think that you see this in public affairs offices as well, that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you get statements that are not attributed to a person, but rather an agency. And it's because it's the stance of the agency or department or military branch, not the respective spokesperson. The same is true for reports like this, where it's not, look, we know Kirkpatrick played a huge role in this. He talked about it, I mean, so it's not like a secret. We know that Kirkpatrick wrote either some, or I would doubt all of it, but some of it played a major role and obviously oversaw the whole thing. But I think that that's where the attribution comes in, or the lack thereof, I should say, is that it's not the stance of Kirkpatrick. I think that when you look at reports like this, it's the stance of the government itself. So and look at this example, Kirkpatrick is now gone. But this is something that has to be essentially maintained as a position unless they have a position change. So it's not attributed to anybody because it's not their opinion. It was done and mandated by the Department of Defense, specifically AARO, to create it. So I'm not necessarily defending that or anything, but rather just giving the context that it's not Kirkpatrick's mindset. I mean, obviously, you and I can probably see where these personal thoughts are put in. Maybe there's some anger, frustration. I think it's clear and palpable that Kirkpatrick is angry. I mean, we see that in his private sector interviews that he's done post-government, but he's obviously speaking for himself with that. With this report, it's the DoD's position. And that's why I think that most reports like this don't have a byline.
So let's stay on that then.
Mm-hmm.
Why would the DoD have a position of saying or commenting on, and I'm using air quotes because it's the way it's written in the report, a group of individuals, like-minded individuals, utilizing social media to fire up the independent thinkers out
Why
there?
why would they touch that, you mean?
Yeah,
why would they talk about
without not naming names,
Yeah.
not saying Bigelow, not we'll get to the name specifics here in a second. But that seems like a very opinionated personal take. And why have that in the report? What if that's the DoD's position? It's just kind of weird.
Well, I mean, they had to comment on it, and why they had to comment on those types of stories. And again, we can get to the names in a second, but why they had to comment on those stories is because that's what was going in front of Congress. And this was a congressionally mandated report. So they had to. Imagine if they didn't. I mean, the backlash from you, from me, from everybody would have been completely warranted if they just didn't talk about that. but they're also in a pickle, right? They don't really talk about specific individuals or badmouth individuals. Rather, they have to keep to the story. So I can kind of understand in the public report why they did that. It's also why I've always been surprised that the government came out with a statement against Luis Elizondo's claims going back, like 6 years now. And why I was surprised was, look at the history. You very rarely see that. You see it with like a Snowden or an Assange, but those are, kind of very unique situations. So when that statement came out and was first published by the media, I was really surprised because it was a direct shot at a named person. I'm more used to, after doing this for decades, when you have public statements or public reports, again, not getting stuff declassified, but rather stuff that's proactively released to the general public. That's generally what you see, is that they lack the identification to the person, but will speak about the topic itself. So I think, to your point, it didn't surprise me that they dealt with the issues because they had to. It did surprise me that they kept some of the names that are very well publicly known, like Bigelow or more so Bass, like why that wasn't punched a little bit more in the report. Rather, they were, saying things like private contract or whatever they said. So those types of things, I was a little surprised. Like, I mean, it's public knowledge, it's something that they publish themselves. They release statements on it. So for them not to put that stuff in the report, that was kind of silly to me. But they may just be on the side of caution, that they dealt with the topic, the stories, and the claims, but left the names out of it. So that way they can't get sued for libel, slander,
legal,
or anything like that.
Yeah. Which, again, would suggest to me something fishy here. And I'm not defending either position. I'm simply not. But as somebody that's reading a report for information, there wasn't a whole lot of information there. And when you say, we brought in the companies that were allegedly reverse engineering spacecraft, and they said no. Okay, right? Wait, who did you talk to?
Yeah.
And why did you accept no? And what evidence was presented? Did they just come in and say no, and you said, okay, who's next, and bring somebody else in? Because that's the way that it reads, John.
I laughed at that part. And the reason is you, according to the report, have these witnesses that come in, they sign their own statements, right? They're going in, they're testifying. Obviously, we're not privy to all the details. We got a taste of it in the report. And so they investigate those and go, oh no, we can't find justification for this. Meanwhile, you see how they went out and tried to find either justification or not for it. And they go to a private sector aerospace company and go, hey, do you guys have an alien crash retrieval thing or a saucer or whatever they asked? And the aerospace company said, no, but we'll sign a document that says no. And Aero's like, see, told you, it's not there. That to me is stupid, right? I mean, that's silly. It's ridiculous because you're discounting the witnesses that came in. And again, maybe some of them should have been discounted. I can name a few that maybe didn't have the supporting evidence that likely went in there. They had a story. They likely believed their story. But they probably just didn't have anything to offer evidence-wise, and that's okay. So from a scientific standpoint, nothing you can do with that. But are you telling me that none of those witnesses were able to come in and prove absolutely anything? And then an aerospace company just had to say, oh no, we don't have that. And then Aero's like, yeah, okay, great. That's good for us. That's stupid. It really is. And so I laughed at that part. Why they didn't name the companies, I can kind of understand a little bit why they wouldn't, because obviously you make an accusation, and I'm just pulling these names at random, but like a Northrop, a Lockheed, whatever type of aerospace corporation, you throw that accusation out there, they become part of the conspiracy, right? And so when the government then pulls them into their report, and maybe they just really didn't genuinely have anything to do with any of this, and you start, spotlighting a Northrop or a Lockheed or whatever, you put an unneeded spotlight on there, and you look at efforts like Storm Area 51 and stuff like that. Sure, that was kind of a failure a little bit, more of an entertainment spoof kind of thing. Obviously, a lot of people showed up, But you may have that on a private sector, and then all of a sudden that changes the ball game a little bit. They don't have the same security. They don't have the same legal ability to, how do I say this nicely? Put their security and their heavy guns, so to speak, up front as a military base would. So you put that spotlight on there, it becomes dangerous because there's crazy people out there.
Except how many books, how many documentaries, how many interviews, how many radio programs, how many TV shows have talked about skunk works?
Yeah.
All of them, right? Skunk works in Palmdale is no secret. And look at Top Gun Maverick, right? The opening scene says Palmdale, California, right? And Maverick's flying the Aurora at Mach 10. Flew over my house, by the way, in the opening scene. It was actually pretty cool. So Skunk Works in Palmdale and Northrop and NASA and Air Force Plant 42 and Edwards. This is nothing new to the community. So why try to sweep that under the rug? And you also leave it open to interpretation. Who is he talking about here?
That, though. The government wants the confusion. I'm sorry, like that part I think is part of the game. They want to leave those holes because it leaves the end user, the reader, us, the general public, scratching our heads. Now, some of those names we can fill in, others we can't, and I think that they like that. I call that tactic. I think it's part of what I call the counterintelligence value to the UAP conversation. And essentially, what I mean by that is you confuse the heck out of the general public to where they don't really know what's going on. They may have an idea. They may think they have an idea. They may think they can fill in the blank. But that's part of the cover-up, in my opinion. And I think that that's the post-2017 UFO conversation versus the pre-2017 UFO conversation. Now the government will openly talk about it to a point, meaning UAP and UFOs, but they want to essentially confuse the situation. They want to muddy the waters. And look, I'm going to be the first to say it. They're doing a good job of it, because trying to get information from them on this topic is near impossible. It's totally different from 10 years ago in a bad way. And a lot of people hate me for saying that, but it's absolutely true. They want to think that, we've got legislation now and people are talking about it. Well, who cares? The secrecy is worse. There's a UAP security classification guide, or SCG, that mandates the security behind all UAP material. On top of that, when I lost my appeal to fight it, they actually added an additional layer of secrecy for people like me to get UAP information, and they were hiding behind a law enforcement exemption. But since June, I think it was, of 2023, I have tried to get the Pentagon to give me an official statement of why, because AARO is not a law enforcement investigation, or excuse me, a law enforcement agency or arm, and their investigation is not necessarily a law enforcement like an FBI. You see what's called B7, it's exemption B7 under the FOIA, all written in US code. You see that a lot with, let's say, AFOSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, or NCIS, or the FBI, or the Department of Justice. That's where you generally see those criminal investigations / law enforcement exemptions. Yet this UAP topic just got that slapped on top of a very heavy secrecy layer of national security. So whatever this is, they are playing this game to cover it up. So the people that think that this is like some new era of transparency are kidding themselves. I mean, it's really a joke. But to go back to the point, that's what they're doing. They're trying to muddy the water, because the counterintelligence value here is you not only confuse the general public, people like you and I that are just asking, questions and trying to push for answers, but who else do you confuse? Everyone around the world, every world government and military, friend or foe. They're trying to go, wait, do they not know that was us? Or wait, that wasn't them? Or wait, what is going on? That confusion is exactly what they want. So they're using this topic. I believe that there's a portion of it that truly needs and warrants scientific investigation. That's being lost in this other muddy pit of a mess that I think the U.S. government is using as a tool. and they're doing a good job of it. I mean, that's not a compliment, but they're doing a good job at covering this up, because it is very, very tough and difficult to get information out now.
Yeah, it's a big wide brush that they're able to sweep over it, and it's I'll just say this really quick. You did about a year ago. You did a YouTube. I think it might have been live. I caught it live on this, right on the exemption and on the paperwork. And I sat and I listened to the entire thing. I was going to text you. It was live. I was going to say, good job. I was too wrapped up in it. And now it was all geek talk. Was it like some sensational thing and alien bodies?
All about, Jimmy.
Yeah. But I was riveted. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a Peabody in this. This is real journalism. This is real work that is being presented. This is, in the literal use of the word, a cover-up.
Yeah,
that's exactly what's going on. And your presentation on that, why it was such a big deal, was amazing. And I was riveted with that. But most people don't understand. They need to listen to what you're saying. It seems like that. Well, it seems like we're, on the golden brick road, right? The yellow brick road, and everything is happy, right? No, it's seriously not that kind of party. Now, going back to the report, there's a section in there where they start to talk about and discounting and dismissing the historical record, that everybody is wrong completely and only AARO is right. And that was like this weird tone that everything took, that there is no reason to have a discussion on this anymore. Yeah. And I thought to myself, you're going to say that David Fravor isn't worth talking about, or the Nimitz, or any other military professional, or Ryan Graves, that they're not worthy of a conversation about what possibly may be going on here? And that was kind of it was so definitive. Yeah. And so off-putting to others that may have concerns about it, but no, this is the end-all be-all, and the discussion is over. Were you surprised about that, to discount everything in the historical record?
Unfortunately, I wasn't surprised, because a couple years ago I had done a video. I love doing these video presentations, and yeah, there's a lot of material in there. But the short of it is, I was juxtaposing what was unfolding, like kind of present day. Obviously, this was again going back 2 years, and what was going on in the 1960s. And it was near identical, like from the former government and former military people that were involved through the Blue Book years, the politician like Gerald Ford, who was coming out, and I have all the documents that were from the Ford Library about Gerald Ford's push for UAP transparency and congressional hearings and so on and so forth. This is around 1966 or so. And you look at how it played out. And it was nearly identical to how it was playing out again when I did this video presentation. And now, as I look back, the end result is exactly the Condon report and what happened in the late 1960s, where scientists, aka Kirkpatrick and his committee, his people that he brought together, / NASA as well, they have these groups that come together of scientists that are much smarter than me and you and everyone else, and they look at all the information and they say, no, sorry, there's really kind of nothing to see here. That is exactly what happened, and what's going to happen? Is this going to cover it up again for the next 50 years to where the FOIA is just really going to be locked down? Look, some people don't have any faith in FOIA, but you know what? It's on the books and we can use it. And right now it's the best tool that we have, because it's produced amazing evidence. And with that point, I want to add that it was the FOIA that brought out the information that can really take this historical record and make it look like the joke that it is. And it's because there have been for decades these UFO cases, these UAP events, these encounters with our United States military and world military and private citizens, but around the globe, that have been documented by the CIA, the NSA, and pretty much every department that you can think of, well beyond that late 1960s era where they said, hey, we're not interested anymore. The FOIA is the one that proved that this was all something very serious. Even CIA material that was in the halls of the CIA with one of their chief scientists in about 1977. So my point being is that there was a lot to this topic. But it's like what they wanted to do with this historical record was ignore all that history, scratch the surface. Now, I will say something positive about it. I was surprised that they actually scratched kind of deep on the surface, because they did get into some programs that, yeah, were conveyed historically accurate and all that good stuff. But the problem is that they didn't go into how flawed Project Blue Book was. That we can now look back at the records and realize that those statistics, the 701 unidentified cases, was likely much larger. They ignored all that actual data that yeah, they want to say, well, we did this, from 1945, 46 or so through 1969 with all these different programs, and look what we've done, and we've done it again. But they don't talk about the real, number one, secrecy behind it, but number two, that provable cover-up. And then there were things that they omitted altogether. That was another recent video that I did. Sadly, I had a major computer malfunction, and it took me a couple weeks to publish. It was recorded on a dead computer that I'm currently on, so it's finally fixed. But I had dropped that video about a week ago, and essentially it showed, in my opinion, and I only took about 12 minutes in this segment, to go over certain things that the AARO report completely missed, which, in my opinion, makes it look like the joke that it is. Well, I'll give you one example. The National Reconnaissance Office, you brought up David Fravor. Obviously, the Tic Tac encounter was the 2004 event, was not in this report or in depth. We'll see if it's in volume 2. But what was discovered through FOIA, there was a researcher by the name of Kyle Warfel that had brought this to my attention, and I dug a little bit deeper, and there were actually more documents about a very heavily classified, it's a top secret system called Sentient, that's operated by the NRO. And just a couple of years ago saw what they described as a tic-tac shaped UAP that they detected on this particular platform. And on top of that, there was some kind of software. Again, the documents were heavily redacted, but essentially it needed to be turned on for them to actually detect these objects. And it was like they were looking for the request to turn it on. Now, I'm sorry, when someone like Kirkpatrick comes out and he goes on the record and he does his podcast tour and he's out there saying, well, we just don't have the data. Where was the NRO Sentient system in his report? Spoiler alert, it was nowhere around. How many of those types of systems exist that are detecting these tic-tac shaped objects? Again, that first one in 2004, we're now in 2024, which means whatever those phenomena, if it's plural, are, they have been detecting it for decades now. That's provable by scientific instrumentation with this sentient, whatever it may be. Again, heavily classified, but it's all there in these documents that they had these detections. What are those objects? Are they drones? Well, okay. But if that was the case, shouldn't we be able to identify a case like the 2004 Tic Tac? Because generally after time, if it's classified platforms, either our own or somewhere else, we kind of learn that over time. Maybe not as quick as 20 years, but come on, it's been long enough. And there's been so much of a spotlight on there. You'd think the DOD would want to, maybe put that to bed. And yet they can't. By their own admission, they say that it's unidentified. They've kind of focused more on the gimbal and go fast, which is all fun and games and great. But I'm sorry, I didn't really find a huge interest in that myself. They're cool, but it's like, what can you do with it? Show me the pilot and let's sit down and go from there. But until that happens, okay, we've got the grainy videos, awesome. But that's about it. So they wanted to put those to bed, but they really ignored the David Fravor, Alex Dietrich, all that testimony from the 2004 event. Sorry, that is kind of telling to me. I mean, there's gonna be a percentage, and arguably a high percentage, of cases that they can put to bed. No argument from me. I totally get that. However, It's that small percentage they can't. And if that remains the 2004, look, I'm skeptical. I'm still leaning towards a classified platform. But regardless, the longer it goes on without them addressing it or identifying it, and just kind of going, yeah, we have no idea what this is. I ask myself, is that part of the game? Do they want to cover up their own tech? And are they lying to the American people? Shocker, that wouldn't surprise me. Or really not have a clue. And either way, it intrigues me, like it doesn't matter which way this goes, but that's why I love this ride is even though that I have that skepticism towards the 2004 event, and I had a lot of heat because I had floated that a few years back on a Showtime show that was it J.J. Abrams did, I think.
UFO.
Yeah, UFO. That was the kind of the first major show, and I was the one that floated that idea, and man, I got some hate mail on that one. But look, I'm also not going to discount the fact that it may not be, and the fact that still years later they still can't identify it. We got to look at that, and hopefully in volume 2 they will address it. But if they don't, that's even more of a tall tale sign. There's something there.
Well, AARO, I'll say AARO. I want to say Kirkpatrick, but let's just go with AARO. There was another statement in there that I'm paraphrasing, but that eyewitness testimony is not good enough without data to back it up. And they may believe their own story. And this is in the report, right? They may believe their own story. But that doesn't mean is what it is.
Yeah.
And we need radar data. We need eyewitness testimony. We need we need 2 or 3 points to look at these same events. And I thought to myself, if Kirkpatrick would just take the time to read Dolan's UFOs in the National Security State, Volume 1, I think, and he hasn't done anything like that. When you have your blinders on, you're not going to look at any data that supports anything that's going to change your mind when it's already made up. That's it. Cognitive dissonance 1.0, right? But did you know 1952, when the Pentagon did their UFO press conference, General Sanford, right? They had everybody up. They had the radar operators from Washington International Airport, which is now called something else, Bush or whatever it's called. Anyway, so it was one of the biggest press conferences the Pentagon had put on since World War II. This is 1952. It's the UFO flap over Washington, D.C., right? On the day that they said that it was a temperature reflection or whatever, temperature aversion, right? That's what it was. On that day, when they did that press conference, there was not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 reported UFO sightings around the United States from military installations, and all 4 had ground witnesses, radar, and pilots that were scrambled that all saw the same thing. There were 4 incidents on that day. And so don't say that there isn't data like this out there. Those are official reports that were given to the Pentagon. And while Sanford is sitting there in front of the press giving this press conference, they've got reports coming across their desk. So there's stuff there historically to take a serious look at, but that's going to change AARO's point of view. And that's exactly.
That was the big problem that I had with it, was that the fact that they ignored that history, and that it's what I call the company line. And I've talked about this for decades, where the government has a stance which roots to Project Blue Book, obviously more program names, but all under that umbrella. And Project Blue Book created a stance for the US government. And I spent years researching the documents and everything surrounding it, and what should and shouldn't have existed throughout all of these agencies. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, I can say that Blue Book was just a farce. Now, I know that a lot of people in your audience are probably going to say, yeah, John, yeah, no kidding. But it's backed by actual documentation and official record. And when you look at the report where they were looking into this, all they did was literally copy and pasted that company line and put it in that whole historical narrative, trying to just parrot the same thing that they've parroted, which has been discounted, in my opinion, but parroted that same thing to lay the groundwork to what they did with AARO. And going back to that video, because you would ask, what else did I put in there? I had given quite a few different examples of what they glommed over, some of which was kind of just post Project Blue Book. Again, the CIA material and whatever they were looking at. That is data. What happened to that? And I've also proven that a lot of those documents have been strategically, and I say strategically for a reason, destroyed. Because I can go back and get documents from World War I. I have actual evidence that there are classified documents still in the National Archives from World War I, not UAP related, but bear with me on this point, that they have these classified records, but they find them, they're there, they can review them, they can declassify them and send them out. With UFO records, it's a totally different story. A lot of the more interesting ones that have come out through the decades that have heavy redactions on them, there is a legal thing that I can do, which is called a mandatory declassification review, or an MDR, that I can file that requires them, as long as the review was more than 2 years ago, for them to go line by line and re-review it and see if they can remove any of the redactions. And I have case after case after case that shows that the CIA, the NSA, and the DIA are mysteriously losing all of their UAP and UFO related files throughout the last few decades. And those, in my opinion, are some of the most interesting, because it's pre this whole AARO, AAWSAP, AATIP, that whole mess, UAPTF, AOI, MSG, LMNOP, whatever. It's prior to all of that, prior to the public hoopla. And there was something in between Project Blue Book and that era that is fascinating. From multiple military encounters through the 70s, which they described as unidentified helos, but they were never able to intercept them or catch them. You've got all these different national security related cases when it comes to UFOs and UAP. And it's fascinating to me, some of which have been declassified and released in full, but a lot of them have been destroyed. They're gone. They're missing. The NSA claims that all of their communication intelligence, or what they call comment files, there's hundreds of them, and it took a court case to get them out. We fought for years. I was not involved in the court case, I should say, but I had appeals going in FOIA cases, and we got them, 25 years ago now, whatever it was, but they were redacted, like blacked out top to bottom. They even used whiteout in between. Years later, I tried to get those reviewed for a declassification review. They lost 100% of them. Not one or two, 100%, just all gone. DIA had a ton of material as well, hundreds of pages of blacked out material. Years ago, requested the same thing. DIA, we lost them all. So when you look at those types of things, it's like, what are you doing? Are you really losing, coincidentally, just UFO related stuff, or is this a malicious tactic for a cover-up? And I'm sorry, if you ask me, I have too many examples. I believe that it's part of the cover-up. Now the question is why, and where did it go? Do they still have it? Yeah, probably. And not to ramble on too long, then the question is, would AARO have access to it? And in my opinion, the answer is no. I don't believe that they would.
Okay.
Yeah, I figured I'd throw you off on that one.
No, brilliant segue, because I like it when it's host to host. You know what you're doing. That's a brilliant segue.
Thank you.
Is this? There is, apparently, John Kirkpatrick has figured out how to penetrate a secret access program, and who's running it. Because according to that report, he's got all the answers. and Congress, the Senate, the White House, nobody knows anything about the money trail, who's doing what, who's working on what. That stuff, man, is so deep into the public sector, and it goes and it disappears. That's the bottom line with an SAP. But you read this report, and apparently Sean just picks up the phone. Right? It's just like, wait a minute here. And what did you make of those comments that he made about secret access programs?
I thought it was silly because, again, he can claim all he wants. The DOD can claim all they want that AARO had full access to everything that they needed. But I'm sorry, I don't think that they're going to do that. I mean, the way that these types of investigations work, sure, I'm sure he had access. I'm sure he saw heavily classified material in some avenues of what he investigated. But I'm sorry, I just don't buy that if there are special access program, crash retrieval related UFO programs out there, that phone call, and in fairness, I know that they stepped into skiffs and stuff like that when they had these secure conversations, so it wasn't as silly as that. But but what they did say in the report was it was as easy as, hey, do you guys have this? And they go, no. And he goes, okay, great. That's all I need to know. That part is dumb to me, because if he really did sit in front of a private aerospace corporation that truly had that kind of stuff, would they tell him? And in my opinion, no. I believe that the access list to that information would be incredibly small. It's a show in itself, and I may throw it off here real quick, but I will say I have my doubts on whether or not it would be in the private sector at all. That I believe that it would be in more secure facilities that are within the government and military installations like in Area 51. But again, that's a different show in itself. So I have my reservations on that. But it was by the report, it was as easy as saying no. And Kirkpatrick took that and said, okay, fine, thanks. That's, again, silly to me, just across the board that we would think that. And so with that level of secrecy, I think that AARO probably had a lot of access, but definitely not access to everything. And that's proven by, it's not conspiracy talk. That's proven by actual classified program history where things have been denied and congressional hearings have been had and Congress was lied to. You look at stuff that came out through the Church Committee and stuff like that throughout the years. You look at the lies. I mean, it's happened before. You look at the mind control programs and all these different research avenues that they've undertook that no one really knew about. Do you really think, like, even then you go in there, hey, are you guys doing some mind control research? The CIA goes, oh yeah, all right, you caught us. You know, that kind of stuff is really silly. I mean, it deserves and requires a lot more aggression to get this material admitted to, and it takes congressional leadership to push it right up to, in my opinion, the White House to push. But when it comes to this issue, we know that presidents have been denied getting access to information or being told no. And then the question is, do they have a right to know or a need to know? And you ask me that again, I would say, no, they don't. And I think that they would lie to a sitting U.S. president. So with that secrecy, and they have, by the way, I mean, presidents have been in the dark numerous times. So with all of that said, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick with AARO makes that phone call and says, hey, sit in a skiff with me, ask that question. Come on. Do we really think that they're going to just put their hands up and say, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You caught me. Am I grounded? Do I have to go to my room?
Yeah.
Right. And
there's my wrist. Slap it.
Yeah, exactly. And when somebody hears something like that and they respond back, and I get it why you would, how could they keep a secret like this? You know, it seems like Kirkpatrick could get done what I'm believing the report. I will go straight to a situation like Edward Snowden. Mm-hmm. Now think about this for a second. If Snowden hadn't have done what he had done, could some investigator, take Snowden out of the picture, right? But some auditor, could they go, somebody from a congressional subcommittee, go to the NSA and go, hey, you got any spying software that you're using on the American public? Yeah, we do. Let's show you our spy room. Right? That's not good. Yeah. That's not going to happen. Yeah. It's simply not going to happen. And there are levels and different areas of secrecy about different stuff that's not UFO related that you are never going to be able to find out. And then you kick it up a level and let's talk aliens and ET. I just don't think you're going to have access to that information, no matter what Sean thinks or AARO thinks they had access to.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The secrecy would be immense with something like that. And I believe the list of people that knew it would be very, very small. And I don't know if you want to pivot to this, but I will make the point here where you have someone like David Grush who wants to talk about what he's heard about programs like a crash retrieval, like non-human intelligence craft and stuff like that. Programs, even though you don't talk about the program name, are inherently classified. I mean, like, you can't just go around and talk about a classified program and describe it and make it be okay just because you didn't name where it is or what the program name is. You know, it doesn't work that way. And so that's where then my skepticism comes over, because you would have this secrecy. I think it's obvious. I think anybody who looks at this and knows anything about government secrets away from UFOs could look at this topic and go, okay, if there really was this crash retrieval program or something like that, the secrecy is so tight about the UFO issue, just what we know about, something like that would be even worse. So to think that David Grush could just come out and talk about it, that's where my skepticism comes in. Doesn't mean I think he's lying, by the way. Everybody always defaults to you're calling him a liar if you doubt him. No, I actually think he's really genuine. I think that he's heard things from people that have told him with what he believes is authority. I believe we can guess who some of those names are. I know Dr. Eric Davis is one that has gone on the record on social media and said that he's the one that fed him the breadcrumbs, I think is how he termed it. So when you look at that, I do believe that David Grush is genuinely conveying those claims. But at the end of the day, where do they root to, right? Where's that evidence? And I just don't buy that whomever is feeding him that information, which to him may have some authority behind it, I have my doubts, because I don't think that these guys would be walking around. You look at someone like Snowden, who comes out with spy software and program names and stuff like that. Sure, you're talking about highly sensitive material, but look at what happened to these guys that do that. You know, some of them are in jail or others are on the run, you know, and hiding in other countries. So, you know, you have this wildly different juxtaposition here when you look at that and clearly highly classified programs. And then when it comes to the UFO topic, people are going around talking about these highly classified programs, and nothing happens. You know, they do podcasts and TV shows, and no one cares, right? That to me bothers me too. It's like, well, why not? And look, that's an interesting aspect to all of this as well.
We're going to pick up on this when we come back. Let's take our commercial break. Tonight it is the Fade to Black Vault. Say it for me, John.
Fade the Black Vault.
You got it. Our guest tonight, John Greenewald. This is Fade to Black. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black Blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 t-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black t-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture, send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black t-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping. And you're going to get a tracking number. And with a Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, it is the Fade to Black Vault. We've got John Greenewald here of the Black Vault. And, John, I want to talk about the IG for a second. And there is, everybody, if you go over to the Black Vault, I think it was posted on the 9th. Today is the 11th. He's got an IG audit report up there, man. That's pretty cool, by the way. Fascinating reading for you geeks out there. Anyway, help me understand this a little bit. We have the IG, the Inspector General's office, which apparently of the DIA, there's a lot of IGs out there, by the way. If you look up Inspector General and you look at how many are, there's every department has got one. There's probably 50. But anyway, Grush presented the IG's office his stuff. IG accepted it. The House subcommittee was also given that and knew that the IG had seen Grush's list of names, places, and so forth. There's that. And it seemed to pass the sniff test with the IG, and it was good enough for Burchett and the subcommittee to bring him in between Graves and Fravor and raise their right hand. The same situation Lou Elizondo did with the IG, and ultimately it didn't pass the sniff test. Is there a difference between what is going on here? Doesn't that give Grush a position? We know his CV. We know his history with the government, with the military. It's all public information. And what was given to the IG and again given to the House, they knew what Grush was about to say. Doesn't that, I don't know if it fully vets him, but he did raise his right hand and he sat in front of Congress and said some pretty incredible things. We all know that. Doesn't that give him a position of listen to this guy? He does have something to say.
Yeah, and I think we should listen to him. I've never said not to listen to the claims, but also keep in mind. Let's just say I know that there's a lot of debate on whether or not David Grush is a firsthand witness, if he has, that firsthand knowledge, or did he hear from other people? Really, kind of what has come forward thus far is that this is a culmination of interviews with 40 different witnesses, some of which we don't know the exact number. Would not go to AARO. They refused to go essentially testify and give their story. It sounds like some actually did, and that's some of what AARO looked at. But if he's conveying the information that he's heard, and again, I go back to what I said in the last segment, to where I believe that he's very genuine. You're not going to, you put your right hand up and swear under oath. It's because you're genuinely telling the truth, that you've learned this information from other people. You've created that belief set, which may or may not be true. Right. So bear with me on that. I'm not saying either way, but David Grush believes that it's true. So by him testifying about this, they're not going to throw him in the slammer if they find out that he was told a tall tale, right? I mean, if he's not a firsthand witness, that he was conveying what he heard from other people who claim to be a firsthand witness, nobody's going to jail for that. It doesn't matter if it was under oath and he signed his life away. He genuinely believed that he was relaying the truth. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. He was telling the truth the best to his knowledge. So I think there's the why I say it that way is there's a big misconception, I think, with the general public, that if you think that what David Grush told Congress is not true, then he would go to jail. And in order for him to go to jail, you need to be proven that you were maliciously misleading a congressional committee or in a hearing under oath, and it was all malicious, that you were lying and knowingly covering something up or telling them something that isn't true. That's obviously when you have legal action taken against you. If you are conveying what you've heard, there's no repercussions for that. And I think that is a big misconception that I wish more people would realize, that he's not going to get in trouble with that, because it goes to the root of what I said and what I think Congress believes as well. He is relaying what he believes. I think that with his background, his positions that he's held, he turned heads, mine included. I mean, he's got an impressive resume. So there's nothing wrong there. And I think that alone probably told the IG in the complaint that there were these programs going on and they were being hidden from Congress and so on, that they were kind of looking that direction a little bit and were impressed by it. Keep in mind, there's two inspector generals involved here, one with the Department of Defense Inspector General, and then the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, or the Intelligence Community Inspector General, the ICIG. And essentially what happened was David Grush felt, after he submitted that first complaint, that there were reprisals that were done against him, and that he was essentially being punished. We don't know the details to that, because the last I've heard an interview with him, he said that investigation is still ongoing, so he can't hurt that investigation, and that's I totally understand that. There's nothing wrong with that. So hopefully we'll learn more about what these reprisals are and what he believes happened to him. But that was the second complaint that was submitted. And then obviously part of that went to Congress as being urgent and credible. Why was it urgent and credible? A lot of people throw those two words around. We don't have the answer to that. Neither do I. So spoiler alert. But the question is, why did they find it credible and urgent? Was it because he felt that there were reprisals? Was it because that these allegations were made and that's all it takes? We kind of don't know. We know that there's heavy hitters involved, former ICIG himself with the representation of David Grush, David McCullough. So I think that you've got big names involved, and that's what turns my head. But sadly, we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle yet, so we can't really make a final determination.
What about now? I was looking for new information, and for researchers like you and myself, you read the report and was like, okay, well, I can't. There's nothing new here, except Kona Blue. Now, Kona Blue caught my attention. Have you done, how many FOIAs have you done on Kona Blue?
I started in January, actually, but I didn't know Kona Blue as the name. If you had listened to one of Kirkpatrick's interviews, he vaguely described Kona Blue. Now, for people like me, you look for those descriptions and things that you can kind of latch onto and then reference and source in a FOIA request. That's exactly what I did. So I filed with DHS in January when Kirkpatrick did one of his first interviews, and he again didn't say Kona Blue, but he did describe essentially what DHS was being roped into. Now, we do know it from the book that was published by Dr. James Lakatsky. I think it was first in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And we knew that they were trying to get the Department of Homeland Security to kind of take the torch, so to speak, of AAWSAP and continue it. So that wasn't necessarily new, but it was a somewhat official source, even though he's in the private sector now. It was a name that I could call on to say, hey, you've got Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, formerly of XYZ, saying this. I want everything on it. So I was chasing it in January. And then when Kona Blue came out in this report, I was like, bingo, there's the actual name. But I will admit, I was surprised at how much in depth that went, because I kind of got the impression, and obviously wrongfully so, but got the impression that they tried to get DHS involved, but maybe didn't get a whole lot of traction. I know the book went into some details and named some names of who they talked to, and maybe there was some interest. But it sounded like by this report, it actually got a little bit of leg to it, and almost went off the ground until obviously someone got involved and killed it. So, yeah, I'm eager to see what documents come out. I think that and credit to the New York Post, Stephen Greenstreet on this. He was watching before the report dropped the AARO website, and he was taking screenshots because the government does what they do best, which is not the right way to do things. And they were editing a live website, getting ready to drop the report. And so they were editing what was actually live on the website, and they were dead links, but it was like the link to the report. So he was posting that out saying, hey, looks like the report's coming. but then this thing called Kona Blue documents. And so my whole point bringing this up is that kind of indicates that there's something else coming. The report was one link, but they're going to have these Kona Blue documents in another link, hopefully available for download soon. Will FOIA produce the exact same thing? Something different? More than that? Who knows? But it was very interesting to see because it looks like they are preparing for something.
The only names that showed up in the report were of dead guys. Yeah. And I thought that was pretty interesting. One, dead men don't talk, right? Okay, that's the first thing. There's nobody that's going to come in and say, I didn't say that. You can't, unless you're going to do it from beyond the grave. And then to turn around and focus on someone who we can assume is Lou Elizondo, right? But there's no names in the report. But to frame this person as, somebody rogue, didn't really have a job title, was working on this in the spare time. There was some research being done. This is, again, the words from the report, but it was done on their own free time, and there was no budget. There was nothing. And it seemed very personal. And if you're going to have a report like that about a government employee, not a civilian, not a company from the private sector, but this is a government agency and a government report talking about a government employee inside of the Pentagon. Why not have Lou's name in there? You've got Harry Reid. He's named Harry Reid because Harry's dead. That's it. That's the only reason why Harry's name is in there. But why do you think that approach was taken? And to paint a picture of somebody being crazy and rogue?
Well, I think it's kind of your summation right there, and I'll use your words of crazy and rogue. They want to just skirt. It's kind of what I don't want to repeat the whole thing I said earlier for sake of time, but it's kind of the same answer to where I think that they don't want that legal repercussion of saying, person X is XYZ. They're lying to you or this or that they just wanted to deal with the claim. And I think that was the conundrum that they were in. Again, that's not a defense of it, but rather they had to address the claims. But now you're going to skirt into a potential legal debacle that if, this former government employee wants to come after the Department of Defense and sue the Department of Defense, then you're opening up to an embarrassment, an issue. Now, I would actually support that. I feel that if the evidence is there and Luis Elizondo feels that the DOD is wronging him, I really wish that type of a lawsuit would come about. I don't support the DOD trashing anybody either by name or by hinting at it. It's no secret I've been highly critical of Luis Elizondo's claims. But in my opinion, based on the evidence, it's rightfully so. I think that we have a lot of questions here and concerns based on actual evidence. We also have questions and concerns based on the lack of evidence. And we also have questions and concerns based on what has been put forth in his own personal testimony through podcasts and interviews and television shows. And, you add in all those contradictions, there's too much not to ask about, right? And I don't know if that came out right. There's too much there for us to just say, hey, let's just ignore it because we have congressional interest and they're talking about UAPs. No, I want to know. And this isn't a personal thing against Luis Elizondo. For me, it's a wider umbrella. I want to know what AAWSAP really did. I want to know what was really official and what wasn't. And it sounds like by this report, they kind of answered it already. But is that true? And how they answered it, for those who didn't read the report, was essentially AAWSAP was supposed to be a forward-looking 40-year into the future program that looked at 12 different areas like lift and propulsion or whatever on how aerospace technology would advance. It's nothing new. In the 60s, they did something called Project Outgrowth that I had uncovered through FOIA that essentially was the exact same thing. And it was this forward-looking program. So that part wasn't new. What was weird were all these stories about Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Why would the DIA go there? I said it on your show, 6 years ago now. It's like, why would the DIA put boots on the ground, whether they be contractors or not, on U.S. soil investigating the paranormal. That's not in their purview. Tell me it was the FBI? Maybe. I'll still be skeptical, but it's a little bit more believable. It's a domestic issue, something that may be a security concern. FBI gets pulled in on those types of investigations by military branches. So it was just really bizarre from the get-go. And so this report kind of addressed all that and said it was essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but off the rails, that it was not what OSAP was supposed to be. Then they got into AATIP, and it got even more weird, where they were essentially saying, yeah, a couple of these guys were doing this in their free time, but nothing was funded, nothing was official. Yeah, that's not what we were told. I wish it was. And I've said this a few times, I think even on your show. I wish that was the story, because and again, I can sit here for hours and tell you about all the different documents and what the government stance was, that company line that I was talking to you about last hour, all of that stuff. I can sit here for hours and talk to you about that, about what the government wants you to believe, but the reality was something different. If the story we heard was, look, they canceled this program, we really wanted to keep going. So we kind of did it on our free time because no one was listening, no one was paying attention. Man, that's a totally different, that's a different message. I would have accepted that, right?
Yeah.
That's not what we heard.
I want everybody to understand that when all of this was unfolding, John and I, and this is without exaggeration, spent hours on the phone together. And I remember John and I reading the OSAP report together, right? Reading it. And is OSAP AATIP? You remember all those conversations? We were trying to connect the dots, and it was like every day we had something else. And and I remember you and I having this conversation specifically as we were reading through the OSAP report. I said, dude, there's no UFO in this anywhere. There's not one reference. This isn't that. This is science fiction. And I get it. You're forward looking, and you're looking at the possibilities, and you're theorizing, and these are very smart guys that are writing these things. And okay, all right, I get that. $22 million for 40 reports based on science fiction. That's a pretty good deal. All right, sign me up for that. But the connection, folding that over into AATIP, that's what that circle wants us to believe, that AATIP was an official thing. And there's a lot of focus in this report on that, separating all of this. It's paranormal, it's the ghost, it's Bigfoot, it's portals, it's a bunch of crazy guys at a ranch. By the way, again, won't name Skinwalker. A ranch in Utah is what is in the report, right? They don't mention anybody. They don't mention Bass. They don't mention Bigelow. They don't mention Putoff. They don't mention Kit Green. They don't mention Eric Davis, or certainly Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and they talk about this group trying to influence Congress. It's just very strange where you leave it so vague that nobody really knows, and you fill in your own blanks. And I just don't find that officially an official report.
Yeah, that going back to that AATIP section, that's where again it got weird, because it was clear that the government's stance still 7-ish years, whatever it is, since 2017 that this all came out, that the AATIP program essentially was their nickname, so to speak, for OSAP. So when the government was submitting statements out and they were saying AATIP, it was really OSAP. Now we have a ton more documents than like 2018, when this mess was really at its peak, where there was confusion. The government was giving these statements like, what are you talking about? Now we actually have those documents, not only the DIRD reports that you just mentioned about the science fiction stuff, but also the contractual paperwork, the PowerPoint presentations. I mean, I got all of that. I put it all online, the memos and everything. And they internally adopted, this was prior to Luis Elizondo coming aboard or having any role in anything, rumored or otherwise. They were using AATIP in those internal documents, but they were really talking about OSAP. So essentially the DOD's stance in this report was double downing on all of that. But essentially saying like nothing happened with AATIP. That it was just a select few individuals on their free time. So again, wildly different than what we've heard. So I just, I get frustrated because I think people have moved the goalpost so far on this. And those that showed skepticism, there's evidence to prove that there was reason to do so. And I think that when you look at how the story behind the 3 videos, the FLIR, the gimbal in late 2017, and then the Go Fast in March of 2018, you look at that story about how it was conveyed to the people through the New York Times, through podcasts. Luis Elizondo did a coast-to-coast interview with George Knapp. It was a wildly different story than it is now. People don't want to hear that, but it just is. No, we've realized now that rules were bent. That's using the words of Christopher Mellon himself. So that whole, like, these went through the declassification process and they were approved for release by the US government. All of that was fantasy. None of that is true. And don't take my word for it. Again, Christopher Mellon is talking about being handed those videos in a Pentagon parking lot by someone, I wonder who that was, that handed it to him, that bent the rules to get those videos out. Now, keep in mind, Luis Elizondo, when he conveyed the story to me, it's all recorded on video. I have it on my channel. He told me he never intended those videos to be out in the open. He also told me he didn't even think that he remembered TTSA had them, that he remembered being, quote, surprised in December 2017 when the New York Times published them. He was with TTSA then. He was part of that organization. How does he not know? Like, that's a really weird, right? Like, you're the guy that filed the paperwork. We have that. It's beyond any shadow of a doubt. You're the guy that said you wanted it for internal government use only on the paperwork. Nobody can dispute that. He's the guy in the recorded video with me. Don't take my word for it. Look at his words. He didn't want those videos out, that he wanted them for the internal use. So he conveyed that to me in my video interview with him. But that's not the story that most people believe. They think that he got these out and declassified them and brought them to the world. It is completely bizarre. Now, why does all that matter, right? When you root something in a charade, right? There's enough evidence here. Again, not my wording. You look at the actual evidence, the documents, and what other people have said. There's enough here to doubt that whole route to this story. When you doubt and question that route and you can prove that it was a bit fabricated, what else is being fabricated to us to prove a point? Why did we fabricate that in the beginning? If rules were bent, why didn't we just come out and say it? Right? You fast forward a year and a half past that New York Times article, leaked photos, leaks were coming out. So leaks were not a big deal. So why would you have this whole charade to get the ball going? And that's where I go back to what I was saying about moving the goalpost. People move that goalpost because how dare I question in the very beginning the origin of those videos? I knew from the get-go, not based on just the government statements, something didn't add up. And I knew from the get-go, and I latched onto that because, again, when you come out of the starting gate with a story and build off that, and that story is now proven to be not accurate at all, what else that you built off of that can potentially be the same level of inaccuracy? And that's what bothers me about it, is because it is important. It's how we got here. And that's what people don't understand. I'm not making this personal against the person. I'm looking at the story because that story is what brought us to here today, 2024, select few senators and congressmen that have an interest, and that's all great. What's it rooted to? 2017, late December, that whole mess that came out. And a lot of that has fallen apart. James Lukatsky himself in his book said that the New York Times was misreporting all these things. So when you look at what other people are saying and you pull it all together, you realize that skepticism is absolutely warranted, and it's continued to be warranted even to this day as more information comes out and we see more of behind the curtain, so to speak, of how this all went down. And you realize, you know what? There's a lot here. So after all of that, then you have to deal with the question someday, why did it go down this way? What's the motivation for this? And I don't, that's another one I don't pretend to have an answer to, but you have to ask that question because there's too much now. Bending the rules when we were told it wasn't, all of that, you know, you put it all together. There's an ulterior motive. There just has to be.
I'm sure you've got these. They were only available for like a day. Chris Mellon had a hidden page on his website with the pictures of the envelope. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And the DVDs?
Yeah,
I was like, holy crap. Yeah.
You remember whose name was on it, right?
Yeah. Should I post it up?
Yeah, post it up. That's known as the Chris Mellon leak. It's pretty controversial. There was a Twitter guy that found those. It was a hidden directory on his server, and on there were a couple other documents, PowerPoint presentation. But the key here are those DVDs, and we heard from Christopher Mellon in one of his interviews. He still had the sleeves that the videos came in from the Pentagon. And those were part of that leak. They're photographs of the DoD unclassified sleeves that these DVDs or CDs were on. It was likely one per video, and maybe the fourth may be the DD Form 1910 that kind of shows that there was an authorization for
internal use. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that could be the fourth CD. But regardless, it had Luis Elizondo's name on it. So the question mark is then when you are slip these in a Pentagon parking lot, and again, I'm not making a conspiracy theory here. That is from Christopher Mellon's own words, that somebody bent the rules and got these to him in the Pentagon parking lot. When you couple that with Luis Elizondo's on video recorded answer that he did not necessarily, or that he did not want these out in the open, that's a security issue, right? Like, who lifted them from Luis Elizondo's desk, unclassified or not, and went out to, Christopher Mellon. Now, these are silly things to kind of ponder, because in my opinion, I'll let you guys decide on who probably handed these off to Christopher Mellon. But again, it's part of that charade. There's something going. Someone's not telling the truth. None of this can all be accurate. And that's an issue in my book, because when you look at the broader picture, it matters, because it roots to this started it all. So when congressmen and senators and so on get involved and they start really digging into this, and you start seeing some of these cards in the House start to fall, again, I'm speaking on the side of the congressman there. Do you really want to go out on a limb and attach yourself to a topic that is already full of stigma? If those cards that have been stacked up at the bottom start falling over, and you start looking at it and go, it's not solid. It just isn't, right? I mean, you don't need to take my word for it, but it's not solid. And so I fear that is backfiring. It's already backfired a bit. I think you have less names in Congress and the Senate that have been talking about this. Yes, you have a core UAP caucus group, the Tim Burchett's and Anna Paulina Luna, was Jared Moskowitz. So you have kind of a core, and that's awesome, man. I fully support that. I want there to be more hearings. I fully support that. But I think you're seeing a dwindling number, and who knows, it may root to the fact that the bottom layer of this house of cards is starting to crumble a little bit. And it's so unfortunate, because we have put all of our eggs into this AATIP basket, right? And really kind of glommed onto that when there's not much to show. And then we've put the rest of the eggs into the David Grush claim basket. And what's the result? The AARO report that we were just talking about, where, true or not, it doesn't really matter, but it's echoing with the general public. You see the media in many outlets changing their tune on UFOs. That's a personal opinion. I don't have any stats to back that up, but I think when you look at the tone of some of the articles, you've got Sean Kirkpatrick doing a podcast tour and doing interviews, and he's doing his op-eds and so on and so forth. You have a very much change of attitude when it comes to the media. Is that even more evidence that house of cards is damaging this conversation? And that's what I've said for a long time, that if you focus on stuff that it's not proven, it doesn't even matter if it's true or not, right? I'm not here to tell you it's all bunk. There may be a lot of truth to it, but if there's absolutely nothing that you can bring to the table to prove it all, then why focus on that? Go back to the other documents, go back to the material, the sentience from NRO, the detections of tic-tac shaped objects. You look at all of that information that goes from just the last couple of years and back decades, go to that, profile that, push that, put that in a congressional hearing, right? Pile up the documents, say the CIA lost this one, this one, this one. Give me an opportunity. I will go through each and every one by one, and put them on the table and say the CIA covered each and every one of these up or accidentally deleted them. But then you put the DIA material right next to it and go through each one by one. Go through the NSA material, same deal, same point, same outcome, destruction of this UAP material. That resonates. It may not be as sexy as alien bodies. I get that. I totally get that. But put it out there and put that in the spotlight for now, because you can't refute it. You can't dispute it. You can't dismiss it. It's all documented with evidence.
And here's the rub with that. And you're 100% right. And having David Grush say the things that he said, they needed to be said. They needed to be heard outside of this community. They needed to be heard on live television. Why? We should question everything. That's why, right? He's got his info. Now let's go. Now we know, and let's go and look at it. But this is probably the mistake of doing it. He is tipping the cards to the Lockheeds of the world that may be actually backwards engineering something. Because now Burchett has got a list of names. IG's got a list of names and addresses and companies. And whatever was there is gone. There's no way that Burchett and Matt Gaetz are going to go, and Anna Paulina Luna are going to go over to Lockheed or any other military installation and open up the hangar doors and look at a flying saucer.
Yeah.
That stuff is gone. You've literally said, we know, and whatever was being worked on at any location that was on that list is now out in the open, and they know that somebody else knows. And that's the problem with somebody like Grush going public on live TV, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're starting the house of cards again with that weaker foundation. It's not about truth anymore. So I just want to make that clear. It's not that the Grush could absolutely be conveying the truth, but you're starting at something that I don't think they're going to have access to that information. So you have to go in those doors, maybe not necessarily in that public hearing, but you got to go find somebody and show them actual evidence and have them take that and build off of it. That's a much stronger foundation. But if you're saying I've talked to 40 people, this is what I've learned, and so on and so forth, there's not much to be built off that. Look, if what he was saying was absolutely true and gospel, right, and it could very well be true, that is world-changing information. That is humanity-altering information. That is something that any politician would love to be a part of and spearhead getting that information out.
Correct.
And the fact that they haven't dropped what they're doing, even in slight, to really push that issue, is concerning, because if they had that opportunity, all of a sudden, the funding for XYZ war or this issue or that issue goes way down on the list for a politician. If you're about to change humanity, if you're about to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that we're not alone in the universe, and the big bad government that you go face to face with, head to head, in your hearings and your committees, and you're able to essentially, so to speak, figuratively speaking, bring them down and prove that they were lying to the American people, but it was you that brought it out. What politician would not be all over that? And yet it's like, yeah, well, we're probably going to have some more hearings in the future. There's a lot of credibility here, but we'll see how it plays out.
Isn't that the opportunity right there for not only the Senate Intelligence Committee, but the House and Burchett Subcommittee? That's the opportunity right there. Okay, we've got Lockheed. Apparently, I'm saying Lockheed, right? Just pick your company.
I know where you're from.
But
floating around now.
Right. Well, apparently Kirkpatrick did that. So why wouldn't Burchett go, okay, I don't know if it's true that Lockheed's backward engineering stuff, but let's get the CEO in here in front of us under oath, and let's ask him some questions, or her, right? And why hasn't that happened? I don't get that part of it.
Well, it goes kind of to the root of what I was just saying, in that if you have the proper evidence, then a subpoena could follow. If you don't have the proper evidence, then a subpoena is going to be a hard sell. To mandate that somebody come in.
Do you need evidence to ask questions? It's not a trial.
When you have, well, I mean, it's not a trial, but yeah, when you're talking about somebody coming in and putting them in the chair, you have to have reason to do that. I mean, your floor space is limited on these congressional hearings, so you have to make sure that you have essentially the best of the best, those that can convey the most information in the chair. If somebody
isn't that what they did? But isn't that what they did with Grush?
So that was his opportunity to come in. Sure.
So if that evidence was strong enough to bring Grush in, and he says this, then you take it to it's not elevating anything. You're just expanding the collection of information. So now you roll in the next round of people that were on this report that apparently Grush said, "I'll give you whatever you need in a skiff. Let's go."
I see. I don't necessarily disagree with that. So then what happened? Right? I mean, if he was there and he's ready to give the names, then you would think that if what he gave was solid behind closed doors, in addition to what he gave in the public hearing, you're absolutely right. Where are the other hearings? And why wouldn't you want to spearhead that effort to slap some guy or girl in the chair, part of private sector company A, Y, or Z, and ask them these pointed questions? If you don't have the strong evidence, sure, you could bring them in, but then you're looking like a fool, meaning the politician, by asking the Lockheed person or whomever about these crash retrieval programs, and they look at you and go, "No,"
under
and then
oath?
just kind of laugh it off.
Yeah, but under oath, under oath.
What? Yeah,
I mean that's jail time. That's perjury, and that's all that I'm saying.
What if he's telling the truth? That's the other part of this.
Well,
what if then would you really advocate for that? Because let's say Grush is being misled. He doesn't believe that he is. But I'm sorry, I've seen enough evidence that spans the last 60 plus years to believe that the government would likely still mislead to a point. I don't want to get onto a PSYOP bandwagon that they're, undergoing some kind of big PSYOP against the American people. I've never been on that bandwagon. But in the same respect, it's not too far-fetched to have partial truths given to somebody like David Grush that then believes what he's hearing and goes and makes some hoopla about it. Remember that counterintelligence value of the UAP conversation. He's now that mouthpiece, not to be as rude sounding as that may have come out, but essentially the mouthpiece to this information that only has 10, 20, 30, 40% truth to it. So then that all goes out there. So then let's say they do slap somebody in the chair and it's the Lockheed CEO or Northrop or whatever. But that was only the information given to Grush. The actual company is Company X that's headquartered over in
I totally
Montana.
agree with that. I totally agree with that.
So what happens though? You put that person in the chair, you ask those questions, they're honest, they shoot the whole thing down. The politician looks like they wasted everybody's time, taxpayer dime included. Are you going to give them another hearing next week to them pull in another CEO and ask them the same questions?
Sure.
I would say that wouldn't play out that way.
No, but I say it's darker than that, though. Much darker. That's play school stuff. That's Play-Doh. That's play school. That's malleable. That's changeable. Let me tell you the darker side. I think that those that are in the know with SAPs and any knowledge of this at all said, okay, check this out. Enough is enough. This discussion is over. Or check out that phone call. Right? Dude, this is your boss. Who? It doesn't matter. And that's what I think is going on. This seems to have stopped as quickly as it got started. And the talk of UFOs and Susan Goff and the Pentagon press room and the videos. Okay, all right, it's UFOs and little green men. Ha ha ha. But Grush was a bridge too far. I'm telling you, I think that's the dark side of this. Do you remember? Now, don't laugh, John. Do not laugh. The Wilson Davis document. All right. There's a page in there that I always found really, really interesting. All right. And that was when Thomas Wilson said that he went to Lockheed, again, not naming names, but we can assume it was Lockheed. And they said, yeah, man, we got a flying saucer. We can't get it to fly. You want to see it? And he's like, what? And he gets pissed off. And they start to argue across the table. You know, it's an attorney, it's a VP, and an engineer, whatever, head of security. And they said, look, man, go back to Washington. Go to the White House. Yell, scream. We don't care. There's nothing you can do. And I just thought that wasn't science fiction. There was some truth to that, the way that this is playing out. And I am sure that Grush had his moment in the sun, okay? But I think the phone calls were made. Enough is enough. This is not going any further.
Yeah, the Wilson Davis part, it's been a while since I read it, but I kind of remembered that they admitted it to him, right, and denied access. He had flown out there and was going to go see it or something. I mean, don't kill me on social media to your listeners if I got that part wrong. That was kind of the gist of it.
Similar. That's
but why would they tell him? Why would they say?
Because they didn't.
That part's true, but you can't see it. That has always bothered me.
All I'm saying is it seems like reality to me. You want to see it? You want to go kick the tires? Fine. Okay, we've got it. We can't get it to fly. But if you're concerned about this secret program and you want to go uncover it, go uncover it.
I thought that they told him that he couldn't go.
No, they said fly back to Washington and yell and scream all you want. That's the quote from the document. Yeah,
I don't know. I have my doubts about that document.
But I'm saying that I'm sure that that's how it's being played out right now. I mean, they just kind of let this go. Kind of spun out of control a little bit, but it was little green men, funny, ha. But now we're ready to name names and start this kind of stuff. And I think the brakes got pumped.
Let me ask you just on that. Now that we're talking about Congress and you brought up Wilson Davis, remember it was submitted into the congressional record and it came up in one of the hearings. And I thought I was quoted in Politico and I got a lot of heat for it, but I just thought it was a facepalm moment, I think is what I said. And it was. I was just like, oh my gosh, really? Like that's what you decide to bring up. But then after I kind of thought about it and got over it, I'm like, okay, well, let's do it. Let's cart Dr. Eric Davis, Wilson, and whomever else that you can get that is from this memo, but obviously the big two, and pit them under oath against each other, and let's see what happens, right?
Well, you got Shannon.
Happened? Nothing. Yeah, and he's willing to cut, but that's fine. Like the big two are the ones that would be, the number one thing you'd see in there. So you've got Dr. Eric Davis, you got Thomas Wilson there. Let's see what happens, and yet nothing happened. So I posed this question to you. If there was any truth to any of that whatsoever, it was put into the congressional record. They obviously caught the attention of a couple people. It's been ample time. What do you think, if anything, happened to it? And again, this kind of goes to the root of why I say you come out of the starting gate with something that may sound sexy and cool, but there's absolutely nothing to come along with it. What happened to that?
Yeah, well, and when I was leaked that document, myself and Dolan were leaked that document on the same day. And I remember reading it going, and I called Richard. My point with all of that, I thought that was key there, was Oak Shannon. And then fast forward this to last year, and Oak Shannon surfaced. He did an interview somewhere. I don't remember specifically what it was, but I watched it. And Oak says, and I was shocked. Oak goes, yeah, man, I talked to Eric Davis. I talked to Admiral Wilson about the two of them, and I vouched for them both, and I got them hooked up. And it was like, wait a minute. I didn't think that document was real. But Oak is saying, you know, and if you remember, Admiral Wilson said, no, it never happened. I was never in Las Vegas. I was never this. I was never that. And Oak says, no, I introduced those guys. Yeah, I spoke to both of them.
It was an interesting revelation, but my big question, I wish somebody would have asked him, was why did Wilson call Oak Shannon to check in on who Dr. Eric Davis was? Because when you're at Wilson's position, you have a lot of resources at your disposal. And that's not a slight against Oak Shannon, by the way, but rather you've got a lot of resources at your disposal. And that's how you vet Dr. Eric Davis. I wish somebody would have asked him. There may be an easy answer. But yeah, I was surprised at that revelation, and credit to Jay at Project Unity for bringing that out. And
was that who?
Down. Yeah, he was the one that brought it out. And look, all those pieces of the puzzle, even though I have my doubts about the legitimacy of those documents, they're cool. And I wrote Jay, even privately, also publicly, but privately, I was like, dude, that's awesome, man. Good job. That's awesome. You've added something to this.
Sure.
And that's what we need to do. And I'm open to have my mind changed on stuff like that, but it bothers me that you have that traction to get a document like that into a congressional hearing and published into the congressional record. And then and that in itself, if it were to be confirmed, changes humanity. And yet like nothing happens, right? I don't get that. I really don't. Somebody's got to, on the congressional side, come out and say why. We looked into it and nothing. There was absolutely nothing. Or I don't want to say this specific about Dr. Eric Davis, so I'm going to say this generally speaking. But part of that UAP report that AARO just released, I kind of, and this is just speculation, got the impression that in one or two different areas that they had kind of heard this story that was conveyed by a witness A that they heard from witness B. And then witness B comes in and kind of changes their tune a little bit and made it, not as what witness A said it. I got that impression in one or two areas.
I did too. I saw that.
And so I'm wondering if things like that happen. And again, generally speaking, but if some of these names are tied into these stories, and so somebody picks up the phone and calls that person, and they go, look, okay, I may have fudged this a little bit, or I was a misunderstanding, or that's not how it went down. However that happens, I would love to hear those types of things, that somebody is doing something somewhere. But all these things seem to keep happening, and these little seeds get planted and then nothing. And each of these seeds have that potential to change humanity as we know it. And then they just like don't water it, and they let it die and dry up and, rot back into the soil. So that's what's frustrating about this. And I don't know who's to blame. Is it the side that if this stuff is fabricated, it's they're to blame? And the congressional side is just going, this is really dumb. That is the impression I got from AARO. I have a lot of problems with that report. But when you look at the tone, which you've commented on, and you look at what they've done, and then you couple that with Kirkpatrick's interviews, there's clearly a frustration that they got bogged down with all this crap. And I hope I can say that. And they get bogged down by it. And that's what their main time is spent doing, is just looking into all these leads that go absolutely nowhere. Meanwhile, I'll bring it up again, the NRO sentient system, the CIA UFO material, all these other documented pieces of evidence that are there, these chunks of data that they can analyze, are nowhere to be found in the report. So who do we blame? This side or that side? I don't really know. I'm just getting frustrated because things just seem to not happen after they start. And it's really frustrating for someone like me.
Yeah. Right now we're at the end of the show. John, thank you so much. I just want to make one last quick comment. Is you heard this from your parents, right? You heard this from girlfriends. You, John, because I have too. Mm-hmm. Just tell the truth, and everything's going to be all right. Right?
Yeah.
Just tell me the truth, and everything's going to be all right. Well,
I was not always all right growing up, but that's a different show.
And right now, is an opportunity for everybody just to come clean. We have the whistleblower side, we have the evidence side, we have the AARO, we have and it's time for everybody to put up or shut up, because right now it is just vague. It's vague all the way around. Grush hasn't named names. AARO's not naming names. Everybody's saying that what they've got is the real deal. And this is the definitive, this is the truth, this is the truth. It's time to put up or shut up. And it's an opportunity right now to just get it out. Get it out. It'll be all right. Rip off the Band-Aid. Because the alternative is E.T. shows up, John, and goes, you know what? So check this out. We gave the United States military free energy in 1945.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we've been hanging out. We've got our own private club. You know, and whatever it is. And then you're going to have an upset public. Then you've got some problems. So I think it's an opportunity right now. Just come clean before James Webb spots something out there and something really, really comes unglued. And I think that's where we're at, my brother.
I hope so. I'll close my thought with something I posted on social media, that it's time for whistleblowers, but I put it in quotes. It's time for whistleblowers to become whistleblowers. And I put it without quotes. And my whole point is that you have people that kind of hint that they have this knowledge, that are called whistleblowers, but they haven't put the evidence out there. Look, label or not of whistleblower doesn't matter. If you have the evidence, now's the time to show it. I'm not a fan of leaking national security related material, but I do not believe that anything related to an extraterrestrial and non-human technology should be classified. And so I fully support anybody that wants to come out with the evidence. Now is the time, because mark my words, if they don't, then you are going to lose the remaining congressional interest that you have. And
Right.
If they continue not to, then you are going to have a cover up that the government is going to be able to do without a problem for the next 40, 50, 60 years, just like they did before, and cover it all up until the next John Greenewald Jr. comes around and starts knocking on their doors and starts pressing for answers. But if things don't get proven, you're gonna find us in that lull again, and it's sad. I hope that those who claim to have that information, they come forward.
Thank you so much, John. It is theblackvault.com. Links are below on social media. Everybody knows where to go find John Greenewald. John, enjoy the rest of your weekend, my brother. Be safe. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
John Greenewald, everybody. And that is how you wrap up a week. That's a perfect show. And wow, it's just a wonderful time to not only host this show, but be a part of this community. It is crazy that we are having this kind of conversation right now out in the public. It's just absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, John. TheBlackVault.com. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, John. Thank you, Dex. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this podcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or reused anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Monday, I've got a physicist that works at CERN live on Fade to Black from Switzerland. Oh, man. I'll see you on Monday. Until then, I want you to be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.